Hello guys, so today I have a video prepared for you like I promised in the news video that I did, and today we're gonna be looking at all the 6 new units individually, looking at their stats, looking at their abilities, and giving my thoughts and opinions about how good they are and where in the meta and team composition they belong. The units we're gonna be looking at are the new Part 2 Astrea unit banner units from the 2 new banners. And first of all, we're gonna look at the adventurers. So the first one I wanna look at actually is the new Loli Ais, the Storm Princess Ais Valentine. And her stats are pretty good in general. She has over 2000 strength. She is a physical single target wind unit, so from her attacks. She has a strong special attack which does ultra wind physical attack with great strength boost, which is what we see lately with units. So from Ultral onwards, some of these units have great strength boosts on their special attacks. She also applies wind resistance, minus 50% on the enemy, and a 25% damage received increase for your units. This is similar to what Aisha has, the Earth Aisha. So this is definitely a really strong special attack, which she wants to be using. She is really good, by the way, in the current record buster that is live, the Earth Fin. So if you have her and if you got her from banners, definitely use her in that record buster, and that should help you get your score up. So the first skill that she has is a strength, fast strength, dexterity, wind attack damage, and counter rate plus 40%, which is pretty much everything that you need on your unit. You have the elemental damage buff, you have the strength buff, and she also does the dexterity and counter rate buff, so she doesn't really need support from any other units in that sense. And then her skill 2 is the skill that she's going to be using most of the time. So the skill 2 is a super wind physical attack with temporary strength boost, and it also does status buff minus 2 turns. I am not really sure where that status buff minus 2 turns is gonna apply. Maybe the familiar rush that comes out has some mechanic. The next familiar rush, which is, by the way, in about a week or so, has some buffs that last for only 2 turns, so using the ice will just end up removing those buffs, because at the moment you do still need, in the record buster that's currently live, you do still need another unit for strength and magic removal, because the buff is usually more than just 2 turns. But we'll see how good this actually ends up being, the extra status buff minus 2 turns. But why this Ice is this good is the skill 3, which is a high wind physical attack with high critical rate. And then most importantly, she has the plus 3 actions for herself. We saw this from the last part onwards, the last Astrea part, where Garrett and Riveria had this plus extra actions. So she wants to use, this Ice wants to use skill 3 first to get the 3 extra actions, and then she uses skill 1 to gain all the buffs. And then every time she uses a skill, when she has those extra actions on her buff, she does that, and that extra action is a low wind physical attack with high penetration rate, but that attack usually does over 100k damage, so it's really not that low as it's stated here. It's actually a really hard hitting attack. And then notably, she also has other passives. She counters using a wind element, that's pretty much the standard now. She has 20% damage upon penetration, 20% crit, and she has the material killer, which is important because the familiar rush that's coming out, all the units from this part have material killer, which means that the next familiar rush is going to be material type enemies, so these units are going to shine, obviously. And something that is missing from this Ice, though, that the last Riveria had, is the 50% extra counter damage. which I think is holding this Ais back a little bit. She would be a bit better with those, but she is still the best single target wind unit at the moment, and she'll probably stay like that for quite some months, at least until the next one comes out. So that's pretty much it for the Ais. So if we move forward, let's look at the next, I think, most impactful one, especially for Wargame. We'll look at the Shakti next. So she is a balanced unit, which means that her nor her strength or her magic stat is the highest that we see currently. Balanced type units actually usually have something like this. So they're more of a support unit, more for their buffs and debuffs than actually dealing damage. But she does have almost 1,600 magic, which is the stat that she does actually use for her attacks. So she does some magic wind attacks as well. Her special attack is an ultra wind magic attack with temporary magic boost, and she applies a strength and agility debuff for minus 50%, which is really high. I don't think we have a minus 50% strength and agility debuff on any unit, especially not on special attacks, non-special attacks, obviously. But I'm not sure if she's gonna actually be using this attack in Wargame. I think she's more so going to be used for her other abilities, and then someone else with higher hitting attacks will make the essays, but that could be wrong. She could also be using this for the debuffs of strength and agility, because the 50% is really high. But then the best skill that she has, which is what makes her as good as she actually is, and she's really good, by the way, for the Wargame teams. Her skill 1 is a fast physical resist and damage received minus 20% buff, the physical resist being a 40% buff for your allies, which is basically a counter to any physical AoE team in Wargame. And she also gets the extra actions. First of all, the buff is about 5 turns long, which is not really removable by the Winter Haruhime, because she only does it for 2 turns, so anything that's 4 or 5 turns usually avoids being affected by Winter Haruhime. And she also applies 3 extra actions for herself. She gets extra actions, and those actions are a 30% heal for your allies, which is an amazing extra action to have. This unit is going to be pretty much the standard unit for the stall Wargame team, especially if the meta is filled with physical units, because Shakti is just meant to counter those physical AoE teams because of the physical resist and the damage received minus 20%. Her skill 2 is the one that's gonna be used after her skill 1, and it's a super wind magical attack with temporary strength boost and ultra counter rate, and she also applies a 40% strength debuff on her enemies and a 20% heal buff to her allies. So this is not a heal per se, it's not a 20% heal, but it's a 20% heal increase. So every heal is 20% stronger. But this comes into effect before the extra action happens. So she increases the heal everybody gets by 20%, and then the extra action from skill 1 comes in, and that heal is 20% stronger. So it makes it a really, really strong heal after every action for the next 3 turns, because she has 3 extra actions. And that just makes everybody really tanky and really easy. It's really easy to survive with that if you're running against, if you're facing a physical composition in Wargame. So yeah, that's pretty much the best 2 abilities she has. And then her skill 3 is just a super wind magical attack that removes strength buffs, which I guess is useful if you're if you need another single target hitting unit, and I guess if you need strength removal as well. She could be used in this Record Buster if you don't have another strength removing unit like Anya or the Haruhime, or there's a lot of them, but you can use her since there is a wind resistance or wind weakness. She has a countering. Her counter is similar to how Haruhime and a lot of other units have heals. Her counter is a heal that prioritizes the lowest health ally, which is great to have on a stall team. And then she also has a bunch of other passives and also the material killer, so she can also be used for damage when the familiar rush with material enemies comes out. That's the best wargame unit that got featured here. And then we have two other units, the Lyra and the Kaguya. If we look at the Lyra first, she is a magic earth unit. Her magic is a little bit below 2000 and her agility is a little bit below 1000. So the stats aren't as amazing as what we see. It's close to it, but it's not the top of the line. And she is meant to be used in combination with all the other magic earth units, so the Halloween Lefia or Halloween Lily, most importantly, the Winter Ryu. So if you have a magic earth team, you can definitely use her to improve your earth magic team, and that team might actually do really well in this war game if you have the pieces. A lot of people don't, especially on the EU server. There's only like 5 people on the EU server who can actually run a fully improved magic earth team. So if you have that, she's a great addition to your team. Other than that, I'm not sure. But if we look at the actual skills and abilities, her essay is an ultra earth magic attack with temporary magic boost and a crit rate, ultra crit rate, and she decreases the magic resist of all the enemies by 50%, which is also a really strong debuff. Don't usually have minus 50%. Her skill 1 is a fast magic resist minus 35% and agility minus 35%. So it's from this we can already see that it fits a wargame team, an earth magic wargame team. So it reduces the magic resist and agility. So your units go first and they deal more damage. And she also gets the 2 additional actions. It's only 2 compared to the 3 that all the other units have, but I think it's still strong regardless of that, because this time it's an AoE attack compared to the single target attack, and it's also a low earth magic attack. Her skill 2 is a mid earth magic attack with temporary strength boost and ultra uncounter rate. The uncounter rates actually do matter, by the way, because the more uncounter rate attacks that we're gonna see, the worse breastplates are going to be in wargame, and they might get replaced with other kinds of armor. I'm not so sure yet, but it could be a possibility that got risen to my attention recently. And she also buffs her own magic for 50% and reduces the enemy earth resistance by 40%, so also just great additions to the earth magic roster with buffs and debuffs. And then she does also have a single target hitting ability if you do need a single target magic attacker, which is a high earth magic attack with 35% buff per every target's magic resist reduction skill. So this comes up to 70% for an adventure and an assist skill. I'm not gonna look at the combos because she usually has combos that combo with the characters that go with her, but she does have extra counter damage, which is interesting because the counter damage is usually more important in Record Buster or AoE or other PvE modes, not the wargame. And she does have an earth counter, obviously, and plus 10% damage upon crit and penetration. And then she also has the Materia Killer. So all the adventurers do have Materia Killer once again, and are going to be very good when the Familiar Rush comes out. They're going to be the most important units that deal the most damage. So yeah, that concludes the review for Lyra. She's going to be really good if you already have a Magic Earth wargame composition, but outside of that, I'm not really sure if she's actually going to make something happen or not. But then if we look at the last out of the adventurers, we have Kaguya, Scarlet Sword Kaguya. Her stats are also pretty decent. Her strength is a little bit below 2000, but her agility is on the high side with almost 1100. And then if we look at the skills, her essay is an ultra fire physical attack with temporary strength boost, and an ultra unguard rate with physical resist minus 60%. 60% is bigger than any other skill that we have so far. So it's just amazing to apply that wherever you're using her. She is basically, by the way, built to be used in combination with Elise that came out in the last part. So if you have her MLB, you would want to get Kaguya as well, because they will be used in combination probably for a very long time, like Argonaut and Kurotsu were from last year. So they were the Fire Bros, and these are, I guess, going to be the Fire Sisters. Her skill 1 is a high fire physical attack with temporary strength boost, and also an ultra uncounter rate. And she also gets 2 additional actions similarly to Lyra, which are low fire physical AoE attacks. And then skill 2 is a fast low fire physical attack with ultra on guard rate and a strength and dexterity buff plus 60%. And it also reduces the enemy physical resist by 35%. So it's only 1 turn, the physical resist, but since she's going to be spamming this attack, it's going to get applied every turn, and there's always the opportunity to extend that buff. So yeah, she basically just goes really well along with Alice. Elise's special attack increases the strength and fire attack damage of all the units, so she buffs Kaguya as well. And then Kaguya's special attack reduces the the physic resist of all the enemies by 60%. So it just goes hand in hand. You do both of the essays, and all of your units deal an insane amount of fire damage, physical. So yeah. She also has a single target skill on her skill 3, which is a high fire physical attack with great strength boost, actually. So she might do quite a lot of single target damage. And it also has a high penetration rate. Her skill is a physical attack with fire element, pretty much the standard. She has HP and mana regen, which is what we do see in some of the units. It helps if they have high mana costs, which she really does not. She's not going to have any problems with mana, especially with the HP and mana regen as a skill. And she does have 50% more damage upon penetration. She is lacking the counter damage, plus 15%, but she's very good regardless of that. And she does also have the Materia Killer like all the other units, so once again, all of these 4 adventures going to be really useful when a Familiar Rush comes out next week or a little bit after that. But I think they already announced the date. I think it's like the 23rd of July or the 24th, 26th, one of those dates. But yeah, those are the adventurers of the banners, and the last 2 units that we're going to look at are the assist. One of them is the Syr, which we can see here. Her highest strength is, her highest stat is agility, and her second highest is dexterity. Her strength and magic are mediocre. And her skill is a physical and magic resist minus 15%, and she also has null ailments for the allies. So basically, she is a really good addition for wargame, because in aggressive physical compositions. So far, people have been using Ariadne to counter the ailments, so that your team doesn't get slowed or stunned, or any of the other ailments. And another assist for reducing either the physical or magic resist, depending on if you were using a physical or magical unit, or I guess just a combination of those units. So now instead of using 2 of those assists, you're only gonna have to use 1 if you're gonna be using this Syr. So she basically frees up another assist slot for those aggressive wargame teams, which is where the unit is going to be useful. Because outside of that, you don't really need the null ailments. It's the same with Ariadne. If you're using Ariadne, you're usually just, I mean, in PvE, you're usually using her just for the strength or magic debuff. So yeah, she can be used for the physical and magic resist in PvE, but she's mainly going to be used for in wargame for the aggressive teams. The next unit, the last one that we're going to look at, is the Asfi. If I can find her. There's not many Asfi assist units, there's only 2. Oops, I just clicked on Anya. Okay, here it is. So similarly, her stats are pretty mediocre. She has a mediocre strength and magic, but she does have a pretty high dexterity stat, higher than what we usually see. And her buff slash debuff is a debuff for the enemies, so it increases the damage of single target attacks by 20% and increases your allied dexterity by 15%. So she is basically a better version of the Moonlight Hestia, Moonlight Reunion Hestia that has been used in Record Buster, because you are using both the single target debuff and you are using the dexterity buff as well to get more counters, crits and penetrations, and basically it's swapped. The Moonlight Reunion Hestia had 15% damage received debuff and a 20% dexterity, and the Asfi has 20% damage received and 15% dexterity, but the 5% damage increased is way more valuable than the dexterity 5% increase. So she's gonna end up replacing Moonlight Reunion Hestia there, especially if you don't have Moonlight Reunion Hestia MLB. If you do have Moonlight Reunion Hestia MLB and you don't get to MLB Asfi, you should still use Moonlight Reunion because of the 5% higher dexterity. But if you don't have Moonlight Reunion MLB, you should just use Asfi. So yeah, that's it for the banners. I should also mention that both of the banners are going to have a heroic trial. This time it's the first heroic trial that's out is for the Ais, the Lyra, and the Asfi. So for the first banner, and next week or in 2 weeks, the other heroic trial is also getting released. So make sure to also farm this event, farm the heroic trial, and get the materials and choose a bond depending on what you're missing, or not what you're missing, but something that you can get to MLB, for example. And yeah, make sure to do that. All the units, as I said, are going to be useful for Familiar Rush, so definitely make sure to use them there. And the wind units can also be used in this current Record Buster to help you in those compositions. So yeah, if you're gonna be doing one banner first and the other second, I guess it is better to do the first banner first, so we can use the Ais in Record Buster, and also because the heroic trial that's out first is for this banner, but it is also just safe to wait a little bit and see the next units that are getting released, because the banner will be live until the 13th of August, which is basically a little bit after the Part 3 units get released, and I'm guessing the Part 3 units are going to be a little bit stronger than the Part 2 units. The Part 2 units are strong, but they're not like amazingly overpowered or broken. So yeah, I think that's all my thoughts, and I hopefully that explains everything about the units, any questions that you might have had. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye!